Hello, and welcome back to Bedtime Storyteller. Tonight, we will follow the journey of a soldier named Kyan. After years of serving in a brutal war, he finally returned home, empty-handed. But deep within a mysterious forest, fate was waiting for him. Before we begin, take a slow, deep breath. Breathe in and gently breathe out. Let your body relax. Close your eyes and allow yourself to drift into the story. 3 years had passed since the war ended. A lone soldier named Kyan walked slowly along a dusty road. His old military uniform was torn and worn. His boots were cracked, with holes appearing in several places. Once he had been proud of that uniform. The villagers had called him a hero. They had praised his courage and sacrifice. But now, no one remembered him. To everyone he passed, he was simply a tired man wearing a ruined uniform. He was hungry, so hungry that he swallowed his food without even tasting it. At the cheap hostel where he stayed, only a little food remained. 2 pieces of hard bread and a thin bowl of soup. That night, inside the quiet and nearly empty hostel, Kyan sat beside a window and stared at the moon. Then he took out a piece of paper. Slowly, he began writing a letter to Liana, the village girl he had once loved, the woman he had hoped to marry, but never got the chance. "Forgive me, Liana," he whispered. "I'm coming home with no honor, no possessions, only wounds and memories." Tears slowly rolled down his cheeks as he read the letter. Eventually, exhaustion overcame him. Kyan fell asleep in the cold darkness, hoping that somehow tomorrow would be different. The next morning, Kyan continued his journey. He decided to take a shortcut through the forest. But the forest was feared by the people of the surrounding villages. Strange stories had been told about it. They said a mysterious creature lived deep among the trees. As the sun began to disappear beyond the horizon, Kyan stopped beside an old tree. He sat beneath its branches, exhausted. Hunger and loneliness had nearly destroyed his hope. He lowered his head. Is this really how my life ends? He stared into the darkness. Will I die alone in this forest and be forgotten by everyone? Suddenly, a sound came from behind the tree. Kyan turned. An old woman stepped out of the shadows. Her black hair hung loosely around her wrinkled face. Yet her eyes were strangely bright. She looked directly at him. "I know what is in your heart, young man." Her voice was dry and quiet, like leaves scraping across the ground. "You are searching for meaning in your life. Now that the war is over." Kyan slowly nodded. "I've lost everything, Grandma." The old woman smiled mysteriously. "Not everything." She pointed toward the enormous tree beside them. "Hidden beneath this tree is a treasure that could change your life. But you must be brave enough to face what lies inside." She handed him an old blue cloth. "Beneath this tree are 3 chambers. Each one is guarded by a powerful dog. Place this cloth beneath their feet, they will allow you to take the treasure." Kyan stared at the tree suspiciously, but then he remembered Liana. He remembered his promise to one day make his family proud and happy. Finally, he made his decision. "All right, Grandma, I'll try," using a rope given to him by the old woman. Kyan climbed down into a dark opening beneath the tree. The deeper he descended, the colder the air became. The freezing wind seemed to pierce straight through his bones. Strange rustling sounds echoed through the darkness. His hands trembled, hands that had once held steady during battle, now shook with fear, but his determination remained strong. After descending nearly 10 meters, Kyan's feet finally touched a cold stone floor. He looked ahead. A long corridor stretched into the darkness. Small oil lamps flickered along the stone walls. Then he heard something, heavy breathing, coming from somewhere at the end of the corridor. With his heart pounding, Kyan slowly moved forward. He remembered the old woman's warning. 3 chambers, 3 guardians. The first chamber was guarded by an enormous dog. Its eyes were as large as dinner plates. They moved strangely as they stared directly at Kyan. The creature bared its sharp teeth. Kyan's hand trembled as he quickly placed the blue cloth before its feet. Then something incredible happened. The giant dog calmly sat down. Behind the guardian was a treasure chest. Inside were countless shining coins and precious pearls. Kyan stared in amazement. He began filling his empty bag. But as he gathered the treasure, he whispered to himself, "I'll use this wealth to help the people who suffered during the war. I won't become like those who cared only about themselves." He made a silent promise that the treasure would be used wisely. The next day, Kyan continued deeper into the underground passage. The air became colder. His breath appeared like smoke in the flickering light. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Drip, drip, drip. The sound echoed through the corridor. Eventually, Kyan reached a massive wooden door. Strange symbols had been carved across its surface. Carefully, he pushed it open. The second chamber was much larger than the first. It was filled with mountains of glittering gold coins. But the treasure was not what frightened Kyan. The guardian was. A massive dog stood in the center of the room. Its eyes were as large as wheels. It was twice the size of the first guardian. Its eyes glowed a deep golden yellow, and its gaze seemed to pierce straight into Kyan's soul. The beast growled. Its voice echoed throughout the chamber. Kyan immediately placed the blue cloth beneath its feet. Once again, a miracle occurred. The enormous dog lowered its head, then calmly allowed him to pass. Kyan began filling his bag with gold. As he worked, he noticed even more treasures hidden throughout the chamber. 2 golden chests, a sword decorated with diamonds, and countless ornaments that seemed to come from forgotten ages. When his bag was almost full, something caught his attention. A small wooden box, hidden beneath a pile of gold. Curious, Kyan picked it up and opened it. Inside were several ordinary-looking firecrackers. They seemed completely worthless. Yet, for some reason, Kyan felt that he needed to take them with him. He placed the little wooden box inside his jacket. Then he continued onward. His bag was now growing heavier with treasure. But the journey was not over. Kyan made his way toward the third chamber. This corridor descended sharply into the earth. The deeper he went, the more suffocating the air became. After passing the final turn, Kyan stopped. His eyes widened. The third chamber was far larger than the first two. Every corner was filled with precious stones. Diamonds reflected brilliant colors across the walls. Rubies, emeralds, and sapphires. They glittered like stars scattered across the ground. But once again, the treasure was not what held Kyan's attention. The guardian was. A colossal dog stood in the center of the chamber. Its eyes were larger than towers. It was even bigger than the previous two guardians. Its enormous eyes were sapphire blue, almost as if they were alive, with their own mysterious power. Slowly, the giant creature opened its eyes. Its massive body nearly reached the ceiling of the chamber. Kyan's hand trembled. He quickly placed the blue cloth beneath its feet. Immediately, the terrifying creature became calm. The guardian lowered itself and became strangely friendly. Kyan looked around the chamber. Here he found ancient artifacts, mysterious objects, and things that seemed to belong to another age. But one particular object caught his attention, an old yellow firecracker hanging from the wall. Kyan took it, and with his bag filled with treasure, he finally returned to the surface. The old woman was waiting for him. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Give me that firecracker," she shouted. Kyan frowned. "What is so special about this firecracker?" "That is none of your business," the old woman snapped. Kyan refused. "If you want it, tell me what it is first." The old woman became furious. Her eyes turned red. "You were never supposed to have it." She raised her staff and swung it toward him. But Kyan had survived years of war. He reacted quickly. Drawing his sword, he struck the old woman. The mysterious witch staggered backward. Weak and powerless, she looked at Kyan with hatred. "You will regret taking that firecracker," she whispered. Then she collapsed. Kyan stood frozen. He suddenly realized his adventure had only just begun. Kyan eventually reached the city, and with the enormous wealth he had discovered, his life changed overnight. For his first few days, he rented an entire floor of the city's most luxurious accommodation. He bought clothes made from the finest materials imported from across the country. Every night, he held lavish parties in the grand hall. Anyone who passed by was welcome to join. Before long, everyone in the city knew his name. Kyan had become one of the richest men in the land. At first, he used his wealth to help the poor. He bought food for starving families. He repaired houses, that had been destroyed during the war. He even paid for the education of children whose families could not afford it. But slowly, something began to change. Kyan became fascinated by the luxurious life around him. He began spending more time with wealthy nobles, people who cared less about him and more about his fortune. 2 years passed, and Kyan's wealth slowly began to disappear. One by one, his new friends vanished. They had only stayed close because of his money. Now that his fortune was shrinking, they no longer needed him. The luxury accommodation refused to rent him a room. Shopkeepers who once welcomed him now refused to give him credit. Eventually, Kyan had no choice. He returned to the slums on the outskirts of the city, the same place where his journey had once begun. Almost all of his wealth was gone. The only thing he still carried with him was the little wooden box containing the mysterious firecrackers. That night, darkness covered the slums. A cold wind slipped through the cracks in the rough wooden walls. Kyan lay beneath a thin, torn blanket. He shivered in the darkness. Then he remembered the little wooden box inside his jacket. Slowly, with trembling hands, he took it out. He opened the box. Inside were only 3 ordinary firecrackers. Kyan sighed in disappointment, but something inside him urged him to try one. Perhaps it could give him a little warmth. He took the first firecracker and struck it against the rough wooden wall. A tiny spark appeared. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the dark room suddenly filled with a strange, mysterious light. From within the shadows, a massive dog appeared. Its eyes were as large as dinner plates. It looked exactly like the first guardian dog Kyan had encountered beneath the ancient tree. Kyan could barely believe his eyes. The creature sat calmly before him, waiting for his command. "Who are you?" Kyan asked in a trembling voice. The dog answered with a deep, powerful growl. "I am the guardian of the treasure beneath the great oak. The spark of the firecracker summoned me." Kyan stared at the creature. "What do you want me to do?" Still shocked, Kyan suddenly realized how hungry he was. "Bring me some food." In an instant, the dog disappeared. Moments later, it returned carrying a plate of food. Kyan stared in disbelief. Only then did he realize the extraordinary power contained within the old firecrackers. With growing confidence, he struck the second one. Another guardian appeared. Then he struck the third. The final guardian appeared, the enormous dog with eyes as large as towers. Now, all 3 miraculous guardians stood around Kyan. They were ready to obey his commands. Meanwhile, deep inside the royal palace, news spread about Princess Elara. The princess was kept hidden in the highest tower of the palace by her parents. The king and queen were terrified because of an ancient prophecy. According to the legend, one day, Princess Elara would fall in love with an ordinary man from the Salata people. The king and queen wanted to prevent that fate at all costs. Kyan heard the story while listening to people talking in the market. He became curious. "I have to see this princess," he whispered. That night, inside his small home, Kyan took out one of the magical firecrackers. He struck it. A guardian dog appeared, and beside it was an enormous axe. Kyan looked at the creature. "Take me to Princess Elara." But the guardian hesitated. "I can only carry out the commands given by the king. It is not my place to bring my master." Kyan thought for a moment. Then he gave another command. "If you cannot take me to her, then bring the princess here." The guardian disappeared in an instant. Kyan waited anxiously. His heart pounded in his chest. A few moments later, the guardian returned, and beside it was Princess Elara. She was sleeping peacefully. Kyan was stunned. The princess was even more beautiful than the stories had described. Her golden hair shimmered like sunlight. Her face was calm and flawless. Kyan sat quietly beside her, simply watching her sleep. He did not wake her. Before dawn arrived, Kyan gave the guardian another command. "Take her back." Carefully, the dog obeyed. The next night, Kyan summoned the guardian once again. He ordered it to bring Princess Elara back. But this time, something unexpected happened. During the journey, Princess Elara woke up. She screamed in fear. The guardian tried to calm her, but the princess was terrified. Kyan immediately ordered the guardian to return her to the palace. He began to regret frightening her. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the queen had become suspicious. When she saw her exhausted daughter the next morning, she knew something was wrong. So she created a plan. She sprinkled flour across the princess's bedroom floor. Then she ordered the guards to watch over the room. The queen also hid a small lantern that would make a sound if the princess was moved from her bed. That night, fate began to unfold. The queen could not sleep. Her mind was filled with worry for her daughter. Since nightfall, she had been hiding behind a thick curtain inside the princess's bedroom. She waited in complete silence, watching, listening, waiting for the slightest sound. Shortly after midnight, the wind suddenly swept through the room. Then, in the blink of an eye, the queen saw something terrifying. A gigantic dog entered through the window. Its enormous eyes glowed in the darkness, and in its mouth, it carried the sleeping princess. The queen almost screamed, but she remembered her plan. She remained silent. The moment the guardian disappeared, she followed the trail. The flour she had scattered across the floor had left a clear white path. It led from the princess's bedroom, through the palace corridor, and toward the outside world. Even though the night was dark, the trail remained visible. The queen immediately called her best guards. Together, they followed the mysterious trail. They passed through the palace gates, crossed the empty market, and eventually reached a small house on the outskirts of the city. Meanwhile, Kyan was sitting quietly inside his room. He had no idea that danger was approaching. His mind was still captivated by the beauty of Princess Alara. Suddenly, crash, the door to his room was smashed apart. Armed palace guards stormed inside. The queen stood behind them. Their faces were filled with anger. "Capture him," the queen shouted coldly. "The thief who dared to steal my daughter." Kian tried to fight, but there were too many of them. 8 trained guards surrounded him. Despite his experience as a soldier, he was overwhelmed. They beat him to the ground, and in the chaos, the mysterious wooden box slipped from Kian's grasp.